Welcome to African American Conservatives, the soul of the conservative movement. I'm your host, Marie Strader. Please go to anchor.fm/AACONS or our Substack at AACONS, AACONS.substack.com. You can also find us at brightnews.com or wherever your favorite podcasts are. Our guest today is Eric July. Eric has over 500,000 followers on YouTube. He is the lead vocalist for the metal rap group Backwards and a contributor to The Blaze. He's also the founder of Rippaverse Publishing and is the writer of Isom. Let's take a look at his work. So cool. So deep in the bowels of the Rippaverse Studios, we have with us Eric July.
Hey, how you doing?
Wow, that is such a cool setup.
Thank you. Appreciate you so much.
Now, at the latest count, the Rippaverse has raised an astonishing $3.7 million through crowdfunding, and it's had over 42,000 customers. Did you imagine that you would see such success when you began this enterprise?
No, I figured that we would have some level of success, to be completely honest, just in how we kind of presented everything. And, I had this established sort of customer base from other ventures and things that I've been a part of. But there was no way that I thought that it would see the level of success that it saw. 3.7 million is something that I thought about of many different ways, and I did not come up with that figure, certainly initially. I'm blessed to certainly be in this position, but I think what this is and the success it really speaks to, yes, the demand of this type of material, certainly in comics, but also the presentation for what it is that in the way that we did it. For us, it was all about launching an actual pre-order campaign. I made sure I spent like $200,000 of my own money to make sure that we had the books ready. I paid my artists. I did all that before we ever asked a dime, from people. So while we gave people the if you look at like a Kickstarter or you look at, let's say, an Indiegogo, and you see kind of that visual and seeing the count of like a crowdfund, let's say, website, I said I'll take that vision, but I won't actually crowdfund. I'll use it as a pre-order campaign, so people can just see the numbers go up, and people love to see that. So it's a testament to not necessarily myself. It's more of this audience, my team, my staff, and really everybody, that we made something happen. This has certainly been an unprecedented event, certainly in comic books today.
Wow. We're getting a little fangirly here because, like I said, I'm going to go off script here a little bit. The three of us that founded AACONS, my husband, DK, and I, also have a thread with some other friends where we chat about comic books, because my husband's been a collector since before I knew him, and we'll have been married 33 years the end of this month, and DK. And so we've been collecting comics for forever. My husband has a collectibles business. And so you have been on our threads for a while. We've been talking about your work for quite some time in our comic book chat. So awesome. It's been awesome to have you here. So what can you tell those who've not yet read Isom #1 about Texas rancher Avery Silman, known also as Isom?
Well, Isom, with the character itself, he's at a special spot in his life where he had previously been an actual hero fighting as Isom, but where the story picks up, he had actually retired prior to. So he had retired. He was just living on his own ranch, doing his own thing. And this story is centered around him kind of making his way back into this big city of Flores Park and finding his way as a former kind of hero. Is he going to get back in it, and all of that? So his sister has a family friend. Actually, they all share the same family friend that has gone sort of missing, and the mother of said family friend has asked of the whereabouts, because there's this old guy that he used to kick it with, Avery, that is, who had been last seen with her. So he's trying to figure out, or he's sent to the city to go, ask him some questions, and that's when it turns into sort of the longest day of Avery's life. So it's this cool kind of part that we're at. Of course, people have to, we're launching. We had the task of launching not just Isom, the character itself. It's his book, yes, but this is going to be an extended universe that hopefully will go on as long as I'm alive, and the customers certainly are willing. So we had other characters that we had to introduce. So we kind of had to be very strategic with how this book lined up in the story, because it wasn't just launching Isom, it's launching the entire universe. So I had to get you other characters to get intrigued by. But if you are into, this is why Isom's suit, for example, is the way that it is. It has this kind of simplified look, because I'm trying to give material to people that can get into it at the ground level, get enthusiastic about it, while also, on the other hand, if you are a comic book person, you'll see it, and it has some level of familiarity, taking you back kind of to the essence of what you think comic book characters and comic books are about.
Where does the term Rippa originate?
That's a funny story. So I didn't come up with it myself. Believe it or not, I was a person that used to, I'm a musician, obviously, and I had to be in middle school when this happened, and that was back, I'm from Texas, so it's back when people banging on lunch tables, like rapping and doing stuff like that. And I would just freestyle rap and do stuff like that. And a friend by the name of Chad at the time had called me that because of the way in my ability kind of to freestyle, and it just sprung from all that, so I can't even credit myself with giving myself kind of that name. It was more of him saying it, hey, he's ripping, and then he would call me Rippa because of that, and it just caught on, certainly, with everybody else. So it's one of those things I kind of just fell into.
Now, some compare the Rippaverse to someone opening a burger joint after McDonald's deciding to go vegan. To what degree is the success of ISOM? Uh, is it a matter of reaching a clientele no longer being served by Marvel or DC?
I think that's certainly part of it. I mean, there's a lot of things wrong with how, definitely, the big two, but the comic
Yes,
industry in general just operates. There's
yes,
bad content all around, and enough to go
yes,
around for everybody. Where, yes, there's the overtly kind of leftism that's kind of present in these days, where these characters are being used as kind of vehicles for like the social and political views of its writers. And
yeah,
while that's a thing, it's also other issues of like continuity issues, canon breaking sort of issues. They
yes.
can't get out of the way of themselves with having all these ridiculous events. So it's yeah, to your point, it absolutely is serving people that have been gone unserved for a while now with comics. But it's a content problem really all around. It's not even just with the quote unquote wokeness stuff.
Yeah.
It's a fundamental issue with how these comics are being presented. People can't keep up really with their own characters. It's discombobulated. It's convoluted. It's all kinds of issues. And I said, you know what? I also, as a customer, former customer of these companies, I know what works. You know what I mean? And I know what I would like. So I looked at it like, well, let's not do what the other guys are doing, and let's just give
Yeah.
people some good material that they can kind of get lost in and have a little fun. And people are enthusiastic about that alone.
That's awesome because that really is the essence of so many of the discussions that we have in our comic book thread chat, is just that it seems like these big companies are getting more and more woke, and it's about having a quota of diverse characters, and not so much the story aspect
Yeah.
or real character development. It's just driven by this kind of woke ideology and a vehicle, if you will, for these writers to be able to express their leftist ideology rather than presenting great storytelling. I mean, when I was a kid, and I won't talk about my love of Harvey comic books, but I grew up on Harvey comic books, but Saturday morning cartoons and all of the comics that I read, it really was about entertainment. It really was about, like you were saying, the continuity of a character, seeing their growth and their development. And now there's, like you said, there's just so many streams. How many Supermans are there? How many Batmans are there? How many, is it in canon? Is it outside of canon? All that kind of stuff. And keeping track of all that is like a full-time job rather than just being able to enjoy a story and being able to sit down and get lost in a universe that's new to you.
That's so perfectly put, because again, for me as a youngster, that's what it was all about and why I became intrigued with comics. It wasn't just that, oh, hey, this is a character, he looks cool, he has a bunch of powers, but it was also that, hey, this character, has their own level of growth. They are existing in a universe with other characters that have their own set of problems and powers and stuff that they're doing. And the fact that they all exist there, you can read like a New Mutants comic or something like that, and it's hey, it's snowing in July, you want to know why, go read that book. Like, it was stuff like that I thought was the coolest thing, where that got lost, because to your point, there's several different versions of the same exact character, and those books will be published at like the same time. So you can get, like, with Marvel, I remember doing videos on this, like, you could go to, let's say, over a 4-week period, like a month, right? You could go to the comic book shop and had got like 16 different like comic books that are centered around Spider-Man, right? Alone, like in that month, like, and they were all from different titles, right? And different versions of this character. And that's just, it makes it intimidating for people that are new to get in, and people that are then like reading this stuff almost see it as an insult, definitely, as they fall so back on the whole multiversal element of, hey, we can reboot the world, we could do all this, so that comic book you had, well, those events no longer matter. And it's like, well, that's kind of messed up if you look at it like that. So for me, those were things that I emphasized with the Rippaverse. We put that type of stuff in our code of kind of like ethics, where we want people to be able to hold us to that standard. Those things are very important to me, very important to this company. I know it's very important to a lot of other folks. So it allows us to have it streamlined. So no matter if you've been there from the get-go since the launch of the Rippaverse, or maybe you come 10 years after the fact, it won't be so just out of whack that you just can't possibly get in on. And that medium is certainly, that happy medium, I think, is what we're going to entertain going into the future.
That's really brilliant because, one of the big things for little kids in particular is collecting comic books. And to your point, you go to a comic book shop and there's 16 iterations of Spider-Man that month alone. That kid is broke. That kid's broke, so, and then if they like other characters or whatever it might be, then, and then like you said, keeping track of, oh, was it in this book, this storyline where this character encountered that thing? Or is it in this storyline where it was, and which one is canon? And it gets crazy.
Yeah.
So now you wrote in the introduction to Isom, quote, "The state of the American comic book industry has been in an unfortunate spot, and I wanted to be part of the solution. This subculture has given me countless memories, stories, and has been a bridge to lifelong friends. I will not stand idle as bad actors attempt to run it into the ground," end quote. Tell us more about these bad actors and why they are hurting the comic book industry, in your opinion.
Yeah, I mean, and that was, I've been a commentator in this space for a very long time, and that was where that kind of quote comes from, and that I'm a creative. I think that's what God put me on this earth to do, is create. And that's where I'm best suited. And it was time to, get this going and certainly launch this. But these bad actors are people that aren't really interested in the material for, let's say, the reasons I would argue that the vast majority of customers are introduced or into it for. And what's happened is, in the age of, be it social media and certainly post, the 2015, 2016, we know what happened then, and how these people just felt like, well, it's up to them to use comic book characters that they didn't create, by the way, as a vehicle for their own personal views and social views. So I think that's the part that a lot of like my detractors lose sight of, is that we're talking about characters that have this established sort of stuff, and then they will act completely out of character. So when like Tim Drake or whatever becomes gay out of nowhere, that doesn't make sense for that character, considering like we just saw him shacking up with another character, a female character in Spoiler, and having this sort of loving relationship there. That's illogical. That doesn't make any sort of sense for something like that to happen. And they gaslight people to act like, well, he just up and changed. That's not how it works. Or Iceman, for that matter, who had been he'd been more of almost like a playboy for Marvel, and then out of nowhere he's just turned gay. So it's one of those things where you have people that have their own set of individual agendas. Sometimes it's just blatant self-inserts, and they're using these characters to basically put it out there. It's like, okay, it's not enough for them to say it on their own personal Twitters or whatever, which they certainly will do that.
Yes.
It's more of, well, I got to take something that you like and recognize, and I got to make it about me. You know what I mean? And it's so insulting to the different customers. And when I say they act bad, or rather I call them bad actors, is because they're certainly not doing any of this stuff in good faith. And sometimes it's straight to like, in spite of their political enemies, right? Despite their ideological enemies. In some cases, the great, when I say great Kelly Sue DeConnick, I'm saying that in tongue in cheek. Her little quote where she's like, Captain America is always a social justice warrior. It's like, what? That's not true. Like that's never been the case.
No.
You can't claim that just because, well, you are exactly that. So that's the insulting part of it. And they were able to get away with it for a little bit, but it became so tiresome as they started giving people promotions that were getting on different books that have already ran other characters into the ground. Then they go move up and run another character into the ground. And it's shown how people are turned off by that. It's not just with the success of like the Rippaverse, it's also seeing how manga and Japanese comics have grown in the West, when they're not doing anything different from what they've been doing for the last 30 years. It's more of, well, they're filling a void, and it just happens to be there in existence when people are being turned off to what they had, known, love, and sort of grown up on with American comics.
That's absolutely on point. That is so on point. It drives me a little crazy. I mean, the whole thing with Cap and Nazism, that just was totally illogical.
Yeah.
To me. I mean, if you know anything about his character and how just unashamedly patriotic and American he is. And so, I don't know. But to your point, I do follow a lot of the actors on Twitter. I won't watch Mark Ruffalo anymore. I'm sorry. There's a few people that I will not. And it's kind of like they've merged their success with the characters. And so I like to keep it separate. If you're going to interpret a character, interpret that character's storyline.
Absolutely.
Don't incorporate your own ideology into this thing. And that's like, to your point, where things have kind of gone off track a lot.
Absolutely. Like that's such an important thing. I say this, like, it would be the equivalent if DC hired me to write a Batman story and I turn Batman into an anarcho-capitalist because I am, right? That doesn't make sense. And because it's not who that character, especially knowing that he works with like Jim Gordon, like none of that makes sense. But that what they're doing is the equivalent of that, where it's like, hey, it's not about the character, it's not about the depiction of the character, it's about you making it who you want them to be, and often that's reflective of your own personal views. And it couldn't be anything further from the character. And in some cases, certainly when we see how they're being wrote in the comic books, but that doesn't matter to them because they're so like narcissistic in a way that it has to be about them and their own personal views, which is why we see a lot of inserts. I talked about before a certain writer who's not very fond of me that works for Marvel, who has turned, like, it's talked about Vixen, the character Vixen, the original black character, basically being lesbian or gay when that's not what the character has been, but she happens to be that, right? So she makes her that. Same can be said for this whole new weird Spider-Man that's I guess paralyzed, but they're a spider person, but they're also disabled, so they're disabled and they're also gay or lesbian
Velma from
uh,
Scooby-Doo. How
like,
many of us grew up with Scooby-Doo? I mean,
yeah, exactly. And so they make it about them, and it's like, hey, look at me. This is this character that you guys like, so I'm gonna make them basically be my vehicle for social views that maybe don't even make sense for that character. And then they try to gaslight you when you say that's not who it is. Like, to your earlier point with Cap, like, that's not who that character is. They like to just pull it out of thin air and say, well, they've always been that way. So it's just textbook gaslighting.
well, and what's so weird about that, Eric, is that, like, it's not even representative, right? I mean, people who are gay are probably about what, 3% of the
Yeah.
population at last count. I mean, it may be growing because it's kind of a trendy thing now, but with the whole trans thing, and that's a whole nother conversation. But I'm just saying, it's maybe 3%, and yet it's like 99.9% of like the comic book characters. It's like, what's wrong with being straight? I mean, Sue Reed and Reed
Yeah,
Richards
Marvel's
getting
Friends and Family.
I
Yeah,
mean, yeah, them the getting married, Sue and Reed getting married. I mean, that would never happen anymore. You couldn't. It would have to be like, Storm and Sue getting married or something.
yeah,
I don't know. And so it's like, why is it bad to have heterosexual characters? Why is it wrong that there are white men, or whatever it is? I mean, this whole thing with uh, uh, the change in character from Superman,
yeah.
the change in actor. I mean, a lot of speculation is, well, is it still going to be? I mean, is it because he's getting a little older and they want to make a younger Superman, or is it that they're going to just change him into like this young black gay something something
Very,
something?
very well could be that. I mean, they, from all accounts, they're still proceeding with Ta-Nehisi Coates' like Black Spider-Man. That there has been no announcement about canceling that. It looks like they're still going to produce. So to your point, like with Henry Cavill, like, one of the few actors in a role that almost unanimously, even if people had issues with some of the movies that he had been in, people liked him playing that character, right? There's not
Iconic.
too much anybody that was like, yeah, he can't be Superman, or he plays a bad Superman. I don't know if I've ever seen anybody say that. And he was, because he often stays out of the whole political nonsense. He's often liked by people no matter where they're at on the spectrum. So it's a serious drop ball. I know they're trying to do this whole reboot of the DC's universe, but it's a drop ball, and it goes to show that these people don't actually care about the customers. They don't really care about
Right.
the fans. And we talked about the egoism and the narcissism with these sort of characters. Or rather, these people that depict them. The same can be said with the directors and the producers. It's like, well, they have to have their own spin on something that already exists. And sometimes, let's say, source material gets in the way. Sometimes the fans get in the way of that vision. So, it's the easiest thing to do. It sounds like well, let me say this. It shouldn't be a rocket science, because it's not. But, I'm not trying to, with like the Rippaverse, so you get people, some of my detractors, that be like, well, he's not even doing anything new. And I'm like, well, that's kind of the point, right? Like, I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel here. Maybe with like the business aspect of things that I have problem with the industry, like the distribution and stuff. But as far as the actual content, I'm making original content with the characters, original characters. But there is let's say, an identity that often American style comic books have, and I'm not in the interest of trying to make it necessarily about me. It's more of, okay, this is what the customers have already indicated that they are into. So let me just give them what they want, as opposed to giving them what I think they should want. And that's the difference with companies like myself and a lot of what's happening in the other comic book companies.
Now, recently we saw a tweet from a comic book artist who wrote, quote, "Has it become industry standard to pay creators ridiculously late for their work?" End quote. What sort of fiscal shape is the comic book industry in that they can't pay their employees on time?
Okay, so this is the elephant in the room, right? This is something that I've been very passionate about, and unfortunately, so many folks that may not like people like myself, they completely lose sight of us addressing this exact problem. The reality is that a lot of even your favorite comic book creators are broke. They have little to no money. They're not getting paid any sort of fair rates, commission rates by way of even the biggest companies. And as because I know exactly which tweet you're referring to, this is a person that has done work for the biggest comic book publishers, be it Marvel, DC, IDW, the major entities, all that, and he's talking about them paying late. That is something that does seem to be more of a standard. Now you could say that, well, hey, it's because of this reason or that reason. At the end of the day, both of them, at least with Marvel and DC, are tied to mega corporate companies. So even if the companies themselves, which probably is the case, they're operating in the red for a lot of their titles, maybe Batman or something is going to make them some money, or Spider-Man is going to make them some money, but it's not coming from the books per se. A lot of it is subsidized out of it, like with merchandise and everything
Yes.
else is really what's subsidizing it, because even on average, like comic book sales in terms of units are down in comparison to previous years. Some people will point to like the recent like Comic-Con review, and they'll say, well, comics are booming, and unfortunately they're not looking at the data more accurately, because it says that, well, it's because graphic novels, which are being which manga is classified as, is dominating them and kind of uplifting certainly the industry. If you look at it in detail, when you look at it by actual units sold, they're selling less. Now, I don't know if that is directly what's tying into the fact that, or the reason why these companies are late. What I can say is no person, the artists that work for the Rippaverse get paid on time, right? And they get paid handsomely. Gabe El Taib, who was the colorist for Rippaverse, or who was the colorist for Isom #1, he came out and told everybody, like, he's paying me better than what, and he was doing big Superman titles. He's doing Star Wars, stuff like that for Marvel. He had done all that. And he's saying that I paid him better than what he was getting for those guys. I pay them on time. Like, this is something that I pride myself in, because I look at it like none of this makes sense. That you have all of these people who are supposedly so creative that have created some of these characters, and they don't have any money. I see the same thing happening with the music industry as well. So, that was a problem that the Rippaverse set out to fix with our own individual economic model. So yeah, they're not paying their artists well. Maybe a handful of them may be getting paid well, and the others, probably aren't getting paid, let's say, on time. You can see, as that man was talking about, 5 to 10 a week. That's outrageous in terms upon completion of turning in a completed version of whatever it is, cover a comic book, whatever it is, and you're not getting paid for 5 to 10 weeks. There's a fundamental issue. But they look at me like a threat, which is sad, even though we're part of the industry that's correcting that aspect as well. They would much rather protect the industry that has left them so broke, as opposed to actually, let's say, I'm not even asking for the support. It's more of, well, they knock folks that are trying to create alternatives, and they're so protective, almost like a battered wife syndrome. They are protecting the industry that has done them so wrong.
Now, given that the industry has assigned the enviable task of making movies featuring Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, three of the arguably greatest comic book characters ever created, excluding Isom, of course. Why did the DCEU fail so miserably?
Yeah, a lot of its content problems. It's more of those like, hey, we're gonna come in, and they kind of were late in terms of developing in comparison to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and they tried to catch up to the Marvel Cinematic Universe despite starting years later, and that was their critical error, as far as I'm concerned, in that they didn't take their time to, let's say, develop it. They went immediately into, okay, here are these characters, and now we're going to have them clashing and working with each other, and yada yada. Justice League comes out, and it's like the direction just was really nonsensical. Now, yeah, I have my problems with some of the actors, maybe cast, Henry Cavill not being one of them. But you
Yeah.
know, Flash actor, I forget his name. But the Flash actor doesn't really play a good Barry Allen. Like, actually plays a bad one. He's not really more Kid Flash, more like Wally West than he is Barry Allen. So there are some casting issues, but I think it's overall direction as opposed to why they failed in the way that they did, and they also weren't really drawing from source material that was part of the more, let's say, acceptable versions of these characters. Even with what you see, like with how they brought in the whole a dark side situation and all that. Like, that was a dropped ball, because that's why Cyborg, even though he's not known as being part of the Justice League, he's in it because he was in the Justice League in the New 52, right? So that a lot of people would argue, and I'd argue, that that's probably the worst era of DC Comics era ever. Like, you know, that's not really, if you're gonna draw from source material, that's probably not the part to get influence from, but they did. So, you know, that was a dropped ball by them. And you know, if I will say this, I did agree with the whole, okay, we need to scrap it and start from scratch, but it doesn't look like James Gunn knows what he's doing either. So I don't think he's going to be looking up for that company.
Yeah, that's another conversation that we've been having in our thread. His name has come up a lot.
Yeah.
Now, every superhero has an origin story. Part of yours involves being a gang member in Dallas in the early 2000s. So how did you go from that world to the world of YouTube and comics and music?
Yeah, like, I was a knucklehead, you know, growing up. I don't shy away from that. I was a flat out idiot in some cases. Made my mother's life a lot more had a lot more turmoil than what it deserved to have. But you know, my ticket out of that was really my legs, and I was a track and field athlete coming out of high school, and that was my ticket out. But you know, a big part of my change, and it's sad that it has to be this way, but it's when it starts to impact the people around you, right? Like, and that's the part of that nonsensical lifestyle that I think doesn't get discussed enough. You could think you the hardest person in the world, but as you get in these conflicts with other people, and you start putting other folks that you love in jeopardy that have absolutely nothing to do with your bad behavior, that's a problem, right? So it was an instance where that kind of happened, but my legs was my ticket out. So, you know, I was a track and field athlete, a very good one. And I made it, you know, a point to where, okay, if I'm going to be going to college running track, then I'm getting as far away from here as I possibly can. And so that's where I went to University of Memphis right out of high school. And then I transferred to A&M Corpus Christi. And that's where I finished my collegiate career in 2013, 2014. And, you know, that was the best thing that I could have done, was say, I'm getting out. I'm going to use my legs to get out. And it introduced me to just a world of different things. Now, I will say the education itself probably was meaningless, to be completely fair. I mean, that's just kind of what college has turned to. It's a lot of fluff. But as far as like me meeting other people, other cultures, interacting with them, you know, for example, my music career really took off during that time, you know, definitely with me being like in a metal band and stuff. I obviously couldn't do in South Dallas doing that back then. But, you know, that was so helpful to me in my individual growth. And I always took advantage of that. You know what I mean? Everything it is that I did turned into something else. So I made sure it was purposeful in my moving. So my legs got me out. My legs got me out of the Dallas area, which then got me introduced to other people who were part of different subcultures. So I could freely, even though I'd always liked metal music, I could perform it now with other people. And then that turned into me getting an opportunity to play like keyboards for a band, you know what I mean? Which turned into an opportunity to see my vocals on display, which then turned into, you know, being in Fire from the Gods, which turned into Backwards, you know what I mean? The band we're in now, it's a Billboard charting band. And, you know, that I leveraged all of that to then, you know, and as I was building my YouTube during that period of time, I've been on YouTube since 2006, 2007. So I've been doing all of that and building my own individual brand. And I was able to get to where we're at now, start doing the commentary stuff in the early 2010s. Like that was a big part of it. So I did a good job in leveraging different things that I had been doing at a time to get me out of that silly situation that I was in before. And I just certainly took advantage of it.
That's such a cool story. My husband also ran track and field, and we listen to a lot of diverse music, and I think that's weird because I think people look at me or look at my husband or maybe look at you and they assume that there are certain genres that we
Yeah.
listen to, and my husband's really into progressive rock, and it's
You
kind of
go.
like bands from the Netherlands or something like that, and it's just kind of like people look at you kind of weird because
Yeah.
that's not the box that they put you in. And it's the same with our politics, right? I mean, that's how AACONS got started, was people came up and
Yep.
congratulated me on my president, assuming that because Barack Obama had the same, skin tone that I did, that we shared the same ideology, and we do not.
Yeah.
So, people like to pin you into a box, and that's not how we roll. So,
Not
yeah.
at all. Yeah, definitely gang from guy that was in gang like to going to being a like in a successful metal band isn't really there's not a whole lot of those probably around. But there's a lot of creative people that unfortunately are kind of placed in these boxes which they don't fit in. And it can be ideological as well, because to your point, people think, well, a black guy must support Democrats, and it's like, nah, not anymore. At least that's not my thing, and hasn't been for over a decade. You know what I mean? And it's unfortunate because as you have these conversations with people that are in these different subcultures, if you do get out there and express yourself and find your way to talking to these other people, you find that there's often people that think like that as well, but they're too like scared because of these sort of boxes that they've been kind of placed in, and they won't speak out against things. And I guess that's perhaps the most sad part about it, that you get people that know what's right, but they're going along kind of with what's expected of them because they'd rather do that as opposed to get any backlash from having an alternate opinion.
That's right. That's right. Which comics and which writers influenced you as a young comic reader, and who influences you now?
Oh, that's such a good question. I'll tell you this. I would say by way of characters, my first comic book character that I was kind of introduced to was Flash by my mother.
Mhm.
And, that was Wally was Flash during that time. But, with a character as I was a kid that whose power was to just run really fast, and obviously me being the athletic sprinter that I was, that resonated with me that way. And I thought, hey, it's the coolest thing. There's this guy whose sole power is to just run really fast. And he's able to do good with that. And that got me into comics, and obviously as an adult, I got and kind of leaned towards more Batman related stuff. But I also came up when I was a kid. It was a interesting time period because we saw what people deem as a lot of the definitive versions outside of comics of these characters that happened to be a thing, and that was in the 90s, right? So you had Batman the animated series, which people but really old and new really look at like the definitive version of Batman, right? Such a great depiction of him. But also X-Men the animated series came out
Yeah.
during that same period of time, as well as Spider-Man. So it's like you had these through that window, all of this material that was outside of the books, of good material to like for people to digest. And I had on my show actually a couple of years back, I had the Erica and Julia Leewald, who were the writers of X-Men, writers and the showrunner of X-Men the animated series. And we talked about this and how that aged so well. And they would talk about how they refused to write down to the audience. It was more of, hey, this is the material is the material, and these are our depictions. And they never felt like they were trying to write down to, yeah, it was on Fox Kids, but that's why you'll get a whole new appreciation for that. If you watch it as an adult, you are going to remember it. It's going to be better than what you ever even remembered it, because it was wrote just for a regular person. You know what I mean? He wasn't trying to write down specifically. So it was just all around good material. So, between that, obviously reading the Claremont era of like X-Men, Chris Claremont's era of X-Men, New Mutants, and all that stuff is where a lot of us point to in terms of being able to be creative with your writing. But it's hard to be like all of the people that I would say wrote the stories that are more influential, be it like the Starlins wrote or drew, and Gerard recipes to all of the like different artists. We had like a lot of artists that have passed over this last year, who were from like my era of stuff that I
Yeah.
read, which is unfortunate. But reading all that work, whether it be Stalin's cosmic eras of work, it's influential, but it's not a whole lot of people. Like, that's a sad thing that I feel. It's like we don't have a lot in comics, at least. You have people that cross over, but are from like this era right now that people can say, well, that person's writing iconic material that people are going to cherish 50 years down the line. There's almost nobody's telling those stories
Mhm.
for the most part from my era and my age group, which is unfortunate. Maybe that changes going into the future, but we got to get better at what it is that we're doing. And this is why I say there's no sense in hiring these people that are so consumed by their activism that they just can't, they're incapable of telling any decent stories.
Now, you are a passionate and articulate political voice. Why then do you seem so opposed to having Isom reflect your political views? Is there no audience for a hero who quotes Ayn Rand and battles the forces of big government?
There absolutely is. Ironically, for example, you speak about Ayn Rand. There's a character by the name of Anarchy in DC Comics who's an objectivist, like Ayn Rand. But to me, that's too easy, right? Like I need this to be fulfilling for myself. And yeah, I easily could have said, "Hey, I'm gonna get." These characters, and they're going to be influenced by Soul and Rothbard and Walter E. Williams, Dr. Walter E. Williams, rest in peace.
Yes.
And that's an easy thing to do. I'd rather drop little nuggets of that stuff,
Yeah.
of like it peeking through, but more so, it's more about giving. I think there's universal truths, right? Of right, wrong, what is just, what is unjust, that I think is going to continue to be present in all of our comic books. There's absolutely a demand. I probably would make a killing if I did it still, but that's too easy. You know what I mean? That's way too easy. I'd rather see what creative ways we can just tell just decent stories, right? But also looking at it like, what are my peers doing? Or, I mean, I don't know if I should even call them that, my peers, because they're lousy. But what are they, like, and they're doing exactly that. And that's having their like personal views be reflective in the
Yeah.
books. This is why Donald Trump was MODOK in a Marvel comic, being
Yeah.
as a villain. This is why Ta-Nehisi Coates had to have a Red Skull basically iterating the views of Jordan Peterson. This is why
Yes.
that weird stuff happens, because they're incapable of like separating their personal politics and views from like characters. Now, in their case, they didn't create those characters, right? When they do that stuff, they don't create the characters. Whereas these are completely new original characters, so I'd be more justified to do it anyway. But it's too easy. It's too easy. I like to have fun, and I think this is something that people are going to be able to get something out of. And yeah, there'll be a nugget. There'll be like people that know me for me. They'll be like, well, he for sure was influenced by this. It just won't be over the nose, like really on the nose with the material.
And you mentioned just now, Thomas Sowell. You've called him an inspiration and
Yes.
your biggest influence. How so?
Oh, well, he was the one that got me out of, between him and Dr. Walter E. Williams, out of like this sort of hive mind of thinking where you have a political or social view just because that's what they told you to have or what you're expected to have, definitely when you're black. I remember still being in this box when I was in college, of like wanting to know about, I wouldn't listen to anybody unless they shared the same skin tone as me. And thank God I came across the likes of like a Thomas Sowell when I wanted to discover no more economists as well as Dr. Walter E. Williams, because that was a rabbit hole that sent me. Really, economics. Everybody has like their way of if they grew up a certain way, like what kind of prods you out of that. And for me, it was economics. And learning, reading like basic economics by the great Thomas Sowell, State Against, here seeing the State Against Blacks by Walter E. Williams, and those significantly changed my life, especially with how Sowell just is able to break things down for like common people to understand. No graphs, or really none of that. Just, hey, this is what it is. These are the facts. Take it in whatever way that you may. And for me, that was it was very important to my growth, just as an individual. So, he's a huge inspiration in the sense that who knows what happens to me if I discovered something else during that time period of, where you're like a sponge, just trying, definitely young people in college, just trying to figure life out, and being able to read stuff and make sense of the world and its economics was so vital to my growth.
And that's important because it just seems like college now, is all about, again, just like with the comic books, it's just about espousing certain ideologies. Where to me, and I grew up in California, I'm in Texas now, but I was in California and not too far from Berkeley. And that was like the birth of free speech. And
Yeah.
now it's like you can't have Ann Coulter on campus, you can't have Ben Shapiro on campus, you can't have an Alan West on campus. You can't have any of these people. It's like, so what's going to happen? Are you going to get like intellectual cooties or something? I mean, it's like supposed to be, you're supposed to be exposed to other
Yeah,
ideas, right? I mean,
exactly.
isn't that the whole purpose of going to college?
Yeah, it's certainly changed, and it's really just a vehicle for the kind of academics to justify themselves in their existence, but also like kind of pump out little soldiers. I believe the public education system as it exists right now, as well as the higher public education system and like universities, that's exactly what it does. You know what I mean? That's what to be. I mean, when you start to really get to the nitty gritty, it's almost like it was what it was designed to certainly do. But yeah, that's what they use to their advantage. And this is why you have so many people come out thinking the way that they think, because that's exactly what it is. And they're being taught by ideologues themselves. They're going to come out thinking that way. And because, it's kind of, we've led these sheep to the slaughter because, so many people have pushed people, obviously, because they look at it like, hey, you're going to better your life, yada, yada, to education, to like the higher education and in university, even if they don't necessarily have to go, say, do whatever career it is that they want to get in, but they're being taught by people that often like are completely opposite from like their parents. You know what I mean? And this is why, you see that person, I say all the time, definitely when all that nonsense took place in 2020, people that was tossing them bricks, in the Starbucks, but you bet your bottom dollar some of them came from conservative parents. You know what I mean? These young, like college age weirdos that just don't know how to act or control their emotions. And this is why you also saw so many of those, like definitely out there in Portland or rather in Oregon, Seattle, when you see like some of the mug shots and you see that a lot of them worked within the public education system. You know what I mean? That were out there marching and doing all that nonsense with your children. So it's like you got to watch it, and it's not what people. Let's say this: university certainly isn't what people like to think that it is. It's this place where people just go learn and figure out their careers. Like it's far more ugly than that these days.
It is. It absolutely is. I homeschooled my kids
There you
because
go.
I would have been down at the school every single day. What are you telling my children? What is it? No, that's not going to happen.
Yeah,
Especially all this, yeah, the stuff that is in textbooks now and all the stuff that they're teaching these kids. I no, I'd have been in people's faces and
yeah,
yeah. So it was good that we homeschooled and to be honest, to your point about all the things that you're involved in, and I'm just being real here. I mean, for our audience, you and I are chatting, but just the broader audience, you know, um, I am biracial, but there were so many things growing up when I was homeschooling our kids that I didn't see a lot of Black families in robotics, and my
Yeah.
son loved robotics. I didn't see a lot of Black families get to do a lot of the things that we were able to do. Now, we sacrificed an income to do it
Yeah.
in California, in Silicon Valley. That wasn't easy.
I could imagine.
But I'm just saying, um, I still feel that our schools are separate and unequal, and a lot of the things, because they're all in Democrat strongholds,
Yeah.
right? And our kids are failing, and I was not going to consign my children to a failing school system. And so we educated them. My son is in game design now,
Yeah.
which is really another field where there aren't a lot of
Yeah.
us folks,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, but
Yeah.
he's in game design. He's 24. My daughter is a veterinary, a certified veterinary assistant. My youngest is still kind of figuring out what he's going to do. He's not quite 20 yet. So, but you're right. Just this whole thing, um, when you send off your kids, you don't know who's going to come back. It's
Yeah.
it's it's a time for exploration, but I don't know that I would be comfortable in this day and age, having my kids come back and be, proponents of Chad and Chaz and Occupy
Yeah.
Democrats and all that kind of craziness.
Yeah, that's the scary part about it all, is that they're going and they're getting some really lousy information from this like old kind of archaic model. I mean, I was talking to my niece this past week about exactly that. Like, 'cause she's about to be a senior, or she is a senior. And I was talking to her about like college and all that and those aspirations there. And it's like, if I to do what it is that I do, for example, and I've amassed a lot of wealth over the years, like I didn't need to be there. The degree didn't help me in any of that regards. If it wasn't for my legs, let me say this: if it wasn't for my legs, and I knew what I knew right now, there's no way that I would go. I wouldn't even recommend somebody like myself would go, not just for the like bad information that you probably are going to get, definitely if you're trying to get like a liberal arts degree, but just the whole all around culture is it's bad right now. It's very, very bad right now. And, I wouldn't want to subject myself certainly to that. And there's alternatives now. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't know of those. Like we talk about trade school on my channel all the time.
Yes.
And like people being able to utilize that to kind of figure out it's a lot cheaper. And in some cases, you make a lot more money doing stuff like that as an option. Like that's not even presented as an option these days. When I was, I'm a relatively young guy, and it wasn't that long ago when I was in college, and I remember like it being like, hey, you got to go, you got to go, you got to go, and while whatever, I understand that. It's like nothing else is presented as the alternative. You know what I mean? To that, it's like, well, you either do this or you're a loser, and that's unfortunate because all of these different trades that exist, from plumbing, electrician, whatever it
Yes.
is that you're doing, the trash man, these guys make a lot of money doing what it is they're doing in their jobs that aren't going anywhere. And I wish that those were presented as an option to people as opposed to it's just college or bust.
That's absolutely right. We were just talking about that with my youngest because he's interested in the trades.
Mm.
My son, the one that's a game designer, he actually got his BS at the age of 20, but he went to a trade. He went to a school that was specifically for game design.
Yep.
He didn't go to a traditional 4-year
That's the
college.
route.
And so, but he's got his degree. My daughter went to a junior college and got her certification, and she's working in her field, amassing more money so that she can decide if she wants to go on to a higher degree or not, or if she wants to stay as a certified vet tech. So yeah, but my youngest is talking about going into carpentry or plumbing or
Nice.
electrical work. I mean, you're never, ever, ever going to not need
That's true.
your work on your car
Job
or
security,
whatever. Yeah,
it's not going to get higher than that.
Now, legendary writer Chuck Dixon said that he has completed a project for the Rippaverse. Can you tell us a little bit about this?
Well, yeah, I haven't announced it quite yet what that entails. With him and I have obviously been in talks with a lot of stuff. I would say tell everybody just hold on to your butts because it's not just with the person you named. It's just a lot of conversations that's happening, and that it was just it was a new opportunity because when we started the Rippaverse and we launched it, and we got so many eyes of people that of like old legendary writers, newer guys that are trying to get in on it, artists and stuff. And that to me is the awesome part of this, is that we're all offering an alternative to allow people to be as creative as they possibly can that had been a part of the old guard previously. And now they see this as an opportunity to get paid well and don't have to worry about the cancellation and all the other nonsense that may come with working with like a Marvel or a DC. You know, to your point, like Chuck obviously was on the show. We talked about that. You know, we talked about I pitched to him like, hey, what if I wanted you to do Rippaverse stuff? What will happen? You know what I mean? And he said, you know my number. You know what I mean? And that's how all of this kind of started. That communication started. So it was awesome to be able to chat with him about kind of working with future projects, potentially with the Rippaverse. And I'm excited. Let's just say that I am very excited for what's to come in 2023.
That's pretty cool. Now, many of those who yell the loudest about the need for more Black characters and creators have been your greatest critics. One comic book Reddit page even bars users from mentioning Eric July. The Rippaverse or Isom. Why has there been such a backlash when you are enjoying the sort of success that they should be celebrating?
Yeah, it's because I don't think like them. That's what it boils down to.
They
And
can't control you. Yeah.
that's really what all this is. It's a guy that does not think like them. It invalidates all of this nonsense that they push. They claim like, oh, it's about blackity black, black, black. And I gave them this character that happens to be black. We don't beat the audience over the head with that. He just happens to be that. And it's a brand new original character that was part of a $3.7 million project. Now, if I was a full-blown leftist and did that, yeah, we'd probably be working on season 2 with like Isom and a TV series. They would have thrown everything they could at me. Right. But because I think in a way that I do, they looked at that as a threat. Because like when you look at like the tokenization, the race changes and all that other weird stuff, they say that has to be done because, well, nobody would ever support an original character and yada, yada, yada. But then I come through, but I happen to not think like them and I present my project. Well, that becomes a problem. So this is a threat to their entire model that they've been relying on for a while. And it's a lot on the line because it proves a lot of their talking points to be bogus. So yeah, my biggest detractors are often these racially obsessed weirdos. And yeah, like we're banned. You can't even talk about it in the biggest comic book forum in Reddit. And you can't discuss it without yourself getting banned by those mods. The industry does not like us. And I think that makes what we did even more impressive because we couldn't rely on the usual channels, right? This was about as organic of a movement could be, in that we just presented something people wanted. They went out there and bought it and they supported it. And we have tens of thousands of satisfied customers. But yeah, we had the chips were stacked against us. Not just them. You saw the big comic book media. They refused to cover it. And the ones that did cover it wrote hit pieces. So it's all about the fact that I'm not this full-blown leftist peddling whatever narrative they expect of me. And I'm a person that is a value liberty. And I just happen to have my own comic book company. And we saw success. And that's a threat to a lot of their model because they know if this catches on, they're done. They're certainly done. We presented the alternative, and there's just going to be more people that come up with alternatives to what happens with the old guard. So because they just can't let go of that and they're so protective of it, they had to try to do everything they could to derail our efforts. But it's just not working. It's not working.
You're absolutely right. And they broke that system. It's their tokenism and wokeism that broke that system.
Yep.
Now and so you're right. And it's awesome because you can't say that, you were propped up by any of that. It's completely organic and only you and your team can celebrate that success. So, hats off to you. Now, comics were reliably male and monochromatic for a very long time. One can appreciate the need of the industry to diversify its roster of characters, but many of the characters who used to do so, such as Nubia, Lady Thor, Miles Morales, are essentially female or ethnic derivatives of established heroes, as we've talked about. Can comic books successfully diversify themselves without the use of what you call tokenized characters?
Yes, and I'm a living and breathing example of exactly that. It takes work. Like I think that people forget that you looked at those characters that you like mentioned, like that have been around for decades before I was even alive, like Miles, like who's Miles is a version of him, Peter Parker, Spider-Man,
Yeah.
a Wonder Woman. Like these are characters that have been around forever. Superman, that have been around forever, and it takes work. They weren't Spider-Man wasn't Spider-Man in 1964. Like as far as like him being the most iconic, probably fictional character, maybe of all time, it's got to be between. In America's sense, in the Western sense, it's got to be between him, Superman, and Batman. And that stuff didn't happen overnight. Like these guys went through decades of growth to get to where it is that they're at, where they've just become basically a part of the American culture. It takes work. Good news is that in the age of technology and social media, it's sped up. It can happen a lot faster than what it could before. But they aren't utilizing that. They use the tokenization as a justification to do all of their weird stuff because they don't want to do the work. Right. So for me, it was like, I'll start from scratch. Fine. I'll give you Isom right off the rip. And I'm just going to pen the pad. Let's see what happens. And people came out in support of it. You know what I mean? In a lot of cases, they supported it more than what they support these characters that they claim to like. I just did a video talking about Miles Morales and like his Ultimate Spider-Man at third volume, his number one issue sold like 42,000 copies. We sold almost 20,000 more copies than that. I don't got nearly the resources that they have that they were throwing behind that character. So it shows that it can be done. It absolutely can be done. They're just lazy and don't want to actually do the work. And what I hate is that the very seldom time that they try to come up with some originality, they think that they are the support. So when it fails, like, it's just because you created an original black character doesn't mean people have to enjoy it, right? Like it can suck too. Like, think about the all original, like white characters that aren't any good, that have come and gone over the years. There's thousands of them. You know what I mean? It happens. So it does take work. It takes creativity. And I think they lack efforts in both of those, and that's why their efforts often fall flat. Whereas to something like Isom hit immediately because we're just taking it to the essence. I'm not trying to focus or hyperemphasize on the fact that nobody focuses on the fact that hyperemphasizes the fact that these other characters that we named are white. Why on earth would I do it with black characters? And that's unfortunately what happens, where they'll give you a black character, but then they have to sit up here and talk about racism and blackness and all this other stuff. And it's like, well, they don't do that with the other characters. Like, why do they have to focus on that with this one? So I'm just about giving people a character that they can love, and he can resonate with people no matter what side of the what race you are. Like, there are white, Hispanic, or Latin American, whatever, black people. There's people from all over that like the character of Isom, and that's what it's about. And they just simply are incapable of creating that. And because they like to think that there's something either wrong with the market or that it's impossible. And like I said, we're a living, breathing example that it absolutely is possible.
That's so right. Now, the comic book industry is currently abuzz with the upcoming Batman Spawn crossover. So, what would be your dream crossover for Isom?
That's tough. Yeah, I did see that. I did see that they are doing that. Comic books have been known for like these kind of crossover events, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles with Batman and all that kind of cool stuff. I don't know that I have like a group of characters that I would want to like work with per se. I will say this: there are people that are known for other titles that I would love to work with and do some stuff with for the Rippaverse, even if that's not like a direct crossover event. I talk about this kind of stuff with like Ethan Van Sciver and his he does Cyberfrog and on all of that stuff. He may or may not be working with the Rippaverse going into the future. I'm more thinking like that. You got Todd McFarlane, who's the creator of Spawn, but he also owns basically the toy market. Could we collaborate on like Todd's Toys with I don't know if that's what I think it's McFarlane Toys now or something like that, or whatever it is, where he basically runs the industry. Could we work with Isom and the Rippaverse characters? That's more where I'm like interested in like crossing over with. I think there's a lot of opportunities with these characters, especially with the growth of stuff like you mentioned your son with game design. I'm a huge gamer. People know this, and I would love to cross. Does Isom get his own video game? Like that's my line of thinking, and I would love to have that character cross over into other mediums outside of just the books. But we got a lot of work to do before we get there.
Well, you know who to call. So now, if you're just joining us, our guest this segment has been Eric July. He is the creator of Isom for the Rippaverse. How do we continue to follow you and your work online?
You can keep up with me, of course, at rippaverse.com if you want to keep up with the company itself. But my handle across multiple platforms, Eric D. July, at Twitter if you want to follow us. But now, people like, hey, how can I support you? Now that we have the Rippaverse, we have my band. That's still a thing. If you want to support Backwards, you can go to backwardsmusic.com. Of course, we will be working on some new music very soon. Actually, we already are. So I know a lot of people are excited for that. But Rippaverse.com is I lived for this, right? This is something that was a lifelong dream that became a reality a lot sooner than what I initially thought. So if people want to like keep up and follow the work and the good things that we're doing, Rippaverse.com is where we would love to have your eyes on. So if you go there, you can keep up with our latest campaigns. You can go to the store. You can still get Isom 1 right now and future books that are to come, because really most of my resources, that's where they're going and growing the Rippaverse.
That's so awesome. It was so great to have you as our guest today on African American Conservatives. Thanks for being with us.
Appreciate you so much, and let's do it again soon enough.
Awesome. That'd be awesome. That was so cool. You know that we're big fans of comics here. We've talked about them before. So I'm really interested to hear what DK has to say about it. Come on in, DK.
Congratulations.
That was awesome.
That was fantastic.
What did you think about that?
First of all, I'm such a big fan of Eric July in general. I watched so many of his videos, have for years, and I admire so many of his point of views. And to be able to have him on our show is overwhelming. I'm very excited.
That's pretty cool.
And to have it turn out to be a greatest interview as it did, I'm really very excited by that.
That's so awesome. Just to see his success. And like you said, for him to be banned, his name be banned on Reddit or whatever, that's kind of a common theme. Why are people so afraid of Black people having their own independent thoughts? Why do we have to have this kind of group think? Why can't we think for ourselves? I have to tell you, some of the most creative people, some of the most intelligent people, some of the smartest people I know are people who are not neurotypical. I mean, they think differently. They have a number of different gifts and talents. They see the world differently, and I think that makes our world better, not worse. Why is that such a detriment?
Yeah, it's not dissimilar from what we see happen in the world of politics when a Black person like Alan West or Herschel Walker, Larry Elder, for example, who's called the black face of white supremacy and so forth. When they step forward, these men and women who represent a conservative point of view, as Eric July kind of does, he's more of a libertarian than a conservative, but he's definitely a right-leaning libertarian. And when they step forward to represent the right, there's just so much discrimination against them. And it's from people who claim to want to see Blacks advance, but they want us to advance in the lane that they set out for us. They want to see Black people become successful lawyers, for example. But if you're a lawyer who represents something that they don't believe in, they want to call you a traitor to your race. And it's the same thing Eric July has went through. He doesn't seem to bother him as much.
No. And he's got 3.7 million reasons to laugh at in their faces. So yeah, I hear you.
Even before them, he has a habit of taking some of what he called haters and allowing them onto his show so they can express how much they hate him to his face, essentially. And he just really puts them in his place. He has one interview with a YouTuber called Jody. It was just brutal the way he's quite a guy. I'm a big fan. As a matter of fact, I want to take a second to show the cover of Isom, and it's available at Rippaverse.com, as he mentioned. It's a little bit expensive. It's like $35 right now plus shipping, but it's on high quality paper. It's not one of these cheap comic books that you still have to pay $6 for. It's like nearly 40 pages, high quality. I highly recommend it. The reviews of it have been fantastic. I can't wait to see where he goes with it. There's other characters that are exciting. One is called Yaira, who's this blonde bombshell type who already has a big fan following. I'm going to guess that maybe that's the project that they won't announce. A Yarrow solo book that the great Chuck Dixon, who I grew up reading, of course. I read so many of his Batman books, his Robin books, seen his interviews. He's another guy we'd love to have on the show one day. I'm going to guess that Chuck Dixon is going to write a Yara book, but I could be completely wrong. I have no inside source, so it's very interesting. Also want to talk about another book.
Okay.
It's a bit more controversial than even Isom. It's something Eric July has mentioned on his YouTube channel, and other YouTubers have mentioned it. But I want to just underscore some of the points that they made, and maybe I can add a few points if I can get that on the screen. Says here, Punisher creator Mike Baron releases another racist comic book. So Mike Baron is he's best known for writing The Punisher, which is another guy who started out as a kind of a right-wing hero because he's a vigilante, didn't like criminals at all. He's the classic vigilante. He's not some guy who's going to capture you and handcuff you if you are a mass murderer and wait for you to be the police, and maybe a few issues down the road you're released to mass murder another group of people. He's the classic vigilante who grabs a gun and shoots you, and a lot of people hate that from the beginning, but that's what Mike Barona's best known for. Now he's starting his own book called Private Citizen, which is about a Cuban American, an ex-Green Beret who lives in South Texas. He sees what happens on the border, the really bad things that's associated with having thousands of people cross the border illegally every day, the human traffickers, the fentanyl or other drug pushers, the cartels, the gangs, and he decides to use his Green Beret training to do something about it. He goes after bad guys. He doesn't go after, maybe Mexican families who cross the border to try to get a decent job for once in their lives, try to get a better life for themselves. He's going after really evil people, the kind of people that we've spoken about on the show, the rapists and so forth. These are the kind of people that the Private Citizen is going after. And this is the reaction we get from the left. This is from the Daily Cools. It's very far left.
Yeah, let me predict what that's going to be.
And this is from one of those pages where their writers can, readers can submit their own stuff. And it says here, there are just a few other racial and national gangs that Punisher creator Mike Baron has demonized in his latest diatribe of racist propaganda and stochastic terrorism disguised as a funny book called The Private American. It is about a vigilante lone wolf wanted by the FBI So that's a good thing already. If you're not liked by the FBI nowadays, you definitely sound like a hero to me, who wears a "Don't Tread on Me" gasoline flag snake on his chest while he brutally murders migrant workers, which he does not. He doesn't murder migrant workers. He brutally murders. It's a very violent book. He brutally murders human traffickers, drug dealers, rapists, the kind of people I just mentioned, and families fleeing fascism. Okay, so definitely a deliberate mischaracterization of the private American.
Oh, shocking! A left leaning publication would mischaracterize? No,
It's amazing to see it done to
no,
this extent. They could at least be subtle. They don't have to hit you over
that's
the head
not
with
their
so much
forte.
mischaracterization. Yeah, I'm gonna move up a little bit just so to show the cover of the comic book. It's right there. It's a little small. It's called The Private American. And I'm going to go up a little bit more just to read the last couple of paragraphs. A little bit further. Okay, it says from the Charlottesville anti-Semitic, which they misspelled anti-Semitic, I believe. From the
So is that anti-Semitic just to misspell it? I don't know.
I just noticed that because I have an editor who would kill me if I
Oh
submitted something
yeah,
with a
she's
misspelling. Like, oh
awful.
my God,
Man, she's
it's
brutal.
terrible. From the Charlottesville anti-Semitic torch riot to Asian hate to the rise of vehicle attacks to the home invasion that left Nancy Pelosi's husband hospitalized, projects like The Private American only fanned the flames of political extremists that led to the January 6th insurrection and the death of
There it
5
is.
DC police officers. I'm not even sure what this person is talking about. This
Well,
is
I
the
was waiting
kind
for
of
J6 to make it. Yeah, they
yeah.
didn't disappoint.
It led to 5 DC police officers. Like this comic book is emblematic of what led to 5 cops being killed.
Yeah, somebody read a comic book and there was J6.
This is the kind of radicalization disguised as entertainment that would fit perfectly on a Klansman's bookshelf.
Oh, come on.
Between the Turner Diaries and Mein Kampf. I guess that's enough.
Oh man. Oh boy.
It sounds silly, but this is what this writer has to deal with, and because of this, they permanently suspended. Because of this and other stuff like this, they permanently suspended him on Twitter. He can't do a crowdfund. He can't do crowdfunding, which Eric July obviously has so much success with. Yeah. They shadow ban him there. Indiegogo, and Kickstarter. They don't seem to want any part of him. So it's just what we're up against. If you're a conservative, even if you're a conservative comic book writer, this is the kind of discrimination you have to face.
That's just so crazy. I mean, first of all, on a Klansman's bookshelf, do Klans people read? And if they do, is it the books without pictures?
I guess they
I don't know. I don't know the reading habits of Klans.
The Turner Diaries and Mein Kampf. So that's
two. I guess so. There's 2. There you go.
At least the Cliff Note versions of Mein Kampf.
There you go. Spark Notes.
Mein Kampf Illustrated or something like that.
Well, that's pretty cool. What else do you want to talk about? That there's just so many things to unpack in that interview.
It's just so much. He and I are so simpatico in our views that so many things I could say that just sound like something he said already. But
we're gonna have to add him to our comic book chat.
Oh yeah,
we'll have to add it. That'd be fun.
Quite an honor.
That'd be fun. That'd be a lot of fun. Can you imagine? Because I mean, when you and our other friend get on a roll, I can see 59 text messages in a few minutes. So I can only imagine the conversations you guys would be having, the fanboys.
Yeah, it would be 2 against 1 though, because Eric July and myself agree on so many things. We'd just be ganging up on your friends. So,
well, that's true. He has a little different perspective.
Yeah, a little bit.
Well, that was a great episode of African American Conservatives. So I think on that note, we will wrap, unless you have anything else that you wanted to talk about today.
No, not right now.
Okay. So there you have it. This is Marie signing off.
This is DK.
And we ask you to go to anchor.fm/AACONS, and you can find our podcast there or at brightnews.com. Until next time, this is African American Conservatives, the soul of the conservative movement.